And he's seeing all these things and operating right now.
The world is a place where man reigns supreme, with the forces of nature as his only possible adversaries. Man is alone, free, and growing stronger. God is either non-existent or unconcerned. It is human initiative that makes history, and it is primarily by force that constellations change. Man can attain his own salvation. This is the world defined by a Polish-American rabbi in 1969, 54 years ago. What are the lies of the world? What does the world believe? We've been going through this series called Equipped Against Lies as part of our year-long look into what it means to be equipped. God has a mission for all of our lives, and he wants to equip us for that mission. And so we've been looking at these three enemies of the soul that we find in our scripture and how their deception can entrap us along the way of our life's journey. The three enemies are the devil, the flesh, and the world, and we're diving into that final one today. Here's what Jesus said about the world. In Luke 9, he says, "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self?" What good is it to gain everything that we desire of this earth and yet lose or forfeit our very self? Jesus also said, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. You would fit right in. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you, a servant is not greater than his master, and if they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. It's a good little man right there. For you guys online, we just had a child run through. It's awesome. It's so much fun. So much fun. Jesus said, if they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours also. See, in this text, Jesus was warning his followers that the world that would eventually crucify him was going to treat them very similarly. The relationship with the world was hostile. The world was the enemy, and yet Jesus didn't pull them from the world. He didn't say, hey, come into this little corner and don't engage at all. But instead, he told them to go into it. In a prayer to his Father right before Jesus was arrested and ultimately put to death, Jesus said, I have given them your word, and the world has hated them. For they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. And he said, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. He said, sanctify them, make them holy by the truth. Your word is truth. And as you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. The world was a major theme in Jesus' teachings, and it was picked up by his followers and other authors in the New Testament. And John, who wrote in one of his letters, he said, do not love the world or anything in the world. He said, if anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. Now, the word for world in the Greek, in the original language that this was written in, is similar to the Greek word for flesh that I talked about a couple weeks ago, in that it has multiple meanings. Right? The word world can literally mean like the planet, God's creation, right? We use it that way often. It can mean humanity, like in the verse that Anais read earlier while we were receiving communion, right? For God so loved the world, all of the people, that he sent his only son to die on the cross for them. And those are great meanings of the word. But the meaning we see in those verses that we just read is not the same as those other two. It's like that first quote by that rabbi. It's an anti-God world that has practices and standards that are associated with secular society. John Mark Comer, who wrote the book Live No Lies, defined the world as this. The world is a system of ideas, values, morals, practices, and social norms that are integrated into the mainstream and eventually institutionalized in a culture corrupted by the twin sins of rebellion against God and the redefinition of good and evil. By twin sins, he's referring to what we see in Genesis with Adam and Eve and the temptation of the devil. The devil, in the form of the snake, told them, hey, God told you not to eat of that fruit. Well, let me tell you, you should eat of that fruit, because if you do, you will become like God. That you would know good and evil, and that your eyes will be open. See, his temptation had essentially two parts, the twin sins of rebellion. The first one was to rebel, or to seize autonomy from God, to secularize their lives and live apart from God. And the second is to redefine good and evil based on the voice in their heads and the disordered desires of their hearts. See, when sin entered the world, everything changed. The distortion became normative. And now sin has been recast as anything but sin. And a major problem that we face in humanity is that we are easily influenced by the pack. And because of the advancements made in technology and media, the pack is easily accessed by every age group in almost every nation in the entire world. Yet as believers, we're called to live lives that are set apart from the pack. Paul wrote, "Bad company corrupts good character." See, we easily become like the relationships we cultivate and the culture that we belong to. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, but the old moral absolutes are now called into question. The new authority of our lives is no longer a God or a book like this, but it's self. The authentic self defined as desire and feelings, and that can lead us down so many different roads that cannot always be trusted. And Jesus said something about these roads. In John 7, Jesus said, "Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." The draw to the world and the truth of following Jesus. Let's go back to a verse we read earlier by John and look at his definition of the world. He said, "For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life come not from the Father, but from the world." Those three things haven't changed. And it's been almost 2,000 years since that was written. And guess what? We all face all of these things in one way or another. Maybe it doesn't look the same for each one of us individually, but we still all face these things. The lust of the flesh, which we've talked about the last 2 weeks, most clearly connects to sexual temptation and distorted love, but it also reflects any desire of our flesh. For food, for drink, for instant gratification, for control, for domination over others, and so on. The lust of the eyes can mean greed or envy or jealousy or discontentment. It's what Max talked about in his sermon last week, where he realized that he was struggling with coveting other people's things or coveting the next big thing. And the new one for us is the pride of life. And that is our human bent to go on our own way. It's our rebellion against authority. It's the way we want to do it my way. It's our we know best mentality. And what do they know? These were the temptations that Jesus faced in the desert when the devil approached him. It's the temptation that Adam and Eve faced in the garden, and it's the temptation that we face today. And yet, in our world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life are not only tolerated, but they are celebrated. One author wrote, "What was universally condemned is now celebrated. What was universally celebrated is now condemned. And those who refuse to celebrate are condemned." And in the world's wisdom, this is progress. But Paul wrote, "For the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight." Now, this doesn't mean that everything that our world values or supports is foolish or detestable. A lot of things are wonderful, but if our lives are driven by the world's wisdom, we're going to be sucked into the lies that will spiral us toward destruction. It's that wide road. But there's better wisdom out there. John Mark Comer wrote, "We would be wise to slow down and honestly seek out Jesus' wisdom on the moral issues of our day. The wisdom that arises from his unparalleled intelligence." We're talking about Jesus here. Unparalleled intelligence, discerning insight, and loving intentions. Wisdom from the Creator God. Wisdom from our perfect Savior, not from a fallen world. So how are we supposed to respond? How are we supposed to react to the lies of this world? Over the course of this series, we've looked at what it looks like to respond. And we've looked at spiritual disciplines and following and living out the practices of Jesus as we fight this battle. But for us to respond to the lies of the world, we have to ask ourselves the question, or even take an inventory in our own lives to see, where have we been assimilated by the world we live in? Where have we drifted from the identity that we have in Christ to the ways of the world? And our response to this battle to resist this enemy in our lives is right here in front of us. It's the church. It's not this building. It's us, it's the people, it's this community of believers. We can't follow Jesus alone. Jesus didn't have a disciple, singular, he had disciples, plural. The call to follow Jesus was back then and is still today to join this community of believers. They didn't call it Christianity back in the day, they just called it the way. We are following the way. It connects great to this picture of the small gate, the narrow gate, and the narrow road. Will you follow the way to life by following Jesus, joining into that community? Because when we follow Jesus together in community, we're able to do better jobs of discerning who Jesus is. We're able to discern his truth compared to the lies of the enemy. When we follow Jesus together in community, we better help each other override our flesh and our struggles and our addictions with the power of God's Spirit that is within us. And when we follow Jesus together in community, we better form deep relationships with other people who with us can live countercultural to the world. See, if we can better unite as a community, we can actually live out the call of God more effectively on the mission that he has called us to. The church is countercultural, and it always has been. I'd like to say more than ever, but if you read the scripture, the church was very countercultural in the Roman Empire. And for 300 years, Christians were persecuted and put to death. They would line the streets with Christians who were crucified, just as a warning of following Jesus. They were countercultural. And yet it is that exact fact of being countercultural that has led entire nations that were anti-God to becoming nations that were for God, that were repentant and surrendered. That same Roman Empire that persecuted and killed the Christians 300 years after Jesus' death, the Emperor Constantine made Christianity the national religion, made it legal. Because the people of God never wavered in their following of Jesus, never wavered from the way, and lived it out so that others could see the glory of God through it. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, he says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." The Greek word for church is ekklesia, and it literally means those who are called out. Those who are called out to live holy lives. The word holy means to be set apart, to be unique, to be different from the world that is around you. To live holy is to live differently from the world. Different in how we spend our money and our time, different in how we steward power and authority, different in how we engage with systems of evil and justice, different in how we talk, different in how we engage in social media, different in how we do marriage and family and sex and romance and dating and singleness. Living lives that are set apart. I'm going to let the Apostle Paul close this one out for us today, because he wrote in one of his letters to the Romans a plea. This was a plea for his friends, and this is my plea for all of us, because I want all of us to find the narrow gate and walk down the narrow road that leads to life, not the world's gate and its wide road that leads to destruction. Paul wrote, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, in view of his loving kindness, in view of his love, in view of his forgiveness, in view of his compassion for you, in view of his sacrifice on the cross for you, in view of his mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, completely surrendered," meaning it's not my own, but it's yours, holy, set apart, and pleasing to God. He says, this is your true and proper worship. And he says, do not conform to the pattern of this world. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. Don't be assimilated to this culture, but be transformed. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. When I was reading this week, it's almost like that restart button, right? Like I just need to push a restart button. I am an addict. I get this. I know what it's like to relapse and then have to push that restart button. Some of you know this as well. Renewing of our minds. How do we renew our mind and lean into the wisdom of Jesus? Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is for you. His good and pleasing and perfect will. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And hear me on this. This isn't God condemning you. This is God loving you. This isn't God calling you out. This is God calling you up. This isn't God pointing his finger at you, but it's him calling you to him. This is his act of love for us. That we would walk in his ways. And we'd walk down that narrow path. That's not really easy to walk down because it's so narrow. Lord Jesus, the life of following you is not easy. Lord, sometimes I wish that the pull of the world and our culture wasn't as strong as it is. I wish that the temptation for sin, and the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life, I wish it didn't have as great of a pull on us as it does, because that would make following you a lot easier. But the gate is narrow, and the road is narrow that leads to life. So Lord, help us to find that gate and to walk that road and not get pulled into the wide gate and the wide road that leads to our destruction. If you're here today and you've recognized that you've been living your life on your own, you've been living your life with your own motives, you've been living your life drawn into that wide road that is the world, maybe you're even having fun while you're doing it, but you're realizing that Christ has called you to something more. That Christ has called you to a place of surrender. That Christ has called you to something maybe more difficult, maybe out of your comfort zone. And you want to make a decision today to say yes to Jesus. To say, that old me, I'm going to lay it down. And I'm just going to walk in the truth of Jesus. It's hard, but it will transform your life. So if you want to make that decision today to surrender your life to Jesus, will you just raise your hand and say, that's me. I need to give my life to Jesus. I've been living my life. When I see those hands, yeah. Yep. Praise you. Yeah, I see you. I'm with you. Anybody else want to make that decision today? Lord Jesus, we praise you. And Lord, and I thank you for your sacrifice for us. So that the sin that we carry, we can just lay it down because you already took care of that by the cross. So I pray for these people who've raised their hand today, Lord, that this will be a moment for them to remember when they gave it all to you. When they realized life on my own is not worth it. Life on my own has led to destruction, but life following Jesus leads to life. And so I want to live that life. And so, Lord, I pray for all of us as we are in this journey together, as we are following you, as we're trying our best to stay on that narrow road, Lord Jesus, that you will just pour out your love on us. And remind us of your love when we fall. Remind us of your love when we turn the other way. And Lord, when we start running in the other direction, pull us back. The Bible says that if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that you are saved. And for you guys who raised your hand today, that's it. You just did that. You're like, Jesus, I'm yours. It's a full surrender. So we love you, Jesus. I pray for these who raise their hands today, Lord, that your Holy Spirit will just fill them, Lord, that you will show them the joy that is found in following you. Next week, it will be the last Sunday of this series, and we're going to do things a little bit different. We're going to spend more time in worship and a little bit more time in prayer, because I think all of us throughout this series, we've recognized some of the lies that we have fallen into, some of the things that we struggle with, and so we want to just create some opportunity for us to lay some things down at the feet of Jesus. And so we'll be back next week doing that. We're going to follow that by doing some more teaching on wisdom. We're going to go into the book of Proverbs that is in our Bible, and so be prepared for that. And then also, as you guys leave today, ladies, there is a gift for you on the way out. But also, we will have our prayer team that is up here. And if you are dealing with anything, and I want to kind of go back to even what Lindsay was praying for before, but if this is a hard day for you and for your family, come and pray with someone. They would love to pray with you. But if you have any other prayer needs as well, please come up here. Also out in the foyer, there's some opportunities to help some kids go to camp. We want all of our preteens, our middle schoolers, and our high schools all to go to camp. And so make sure you go check that out. And if you are in one of those age groups, we want you to go to camp. So go connect out there, get connected, because we want you to go to camp. Love you all. Be blessed this week. We'll see you guys again next Sunday.